Hello, family. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever or wherever you might be listening to this audio podcast from. I'd like to welcome you specially. My name is Arise Michael Godfrey, and I am your friend. I welcome you specially to Golden Moments with Mr. Rice. I want to thank the leadership of life in the university for making this podcast possible for you and I. So thank you for joining in. Remember, this is a four-part series. Last week we looked at the greatest story ever told. All right, and here you are again. All right, thank you so much because today we're going to be looking at why people don't grow. All right, just in case you missed any of the section or the last week's section, or perhaps any of the section, all right, among these four parts sections we're going to be having on intentional living or intentional growth. I like you to head on Spotify, all right? Just search Arise Michael Godfrey or search Life in University. You would find this very podcast there. Or you can head on to YouTube, all right? And we would make this material available across more platforms, AudioMac, all right? So wherever you listen to your podcast from, it's available and you can get it from there. All right. So thank you so much. So let me quickly do a recap for those who weren't in attendance last week. All right, I started by telling you that if you must live purposefully or you must grow intentionally, that there are two conditions that must be met. And now this condition must be met without a compromise. Two conditions. As a matter of fact, you don't choose what condition to meet. You don't choose to meet the first condition or neglect the second condition or then neglect the second condition. You don't choose to apply the second condition and neglect, all right, the first condition. Both conditions work together. All right, there's a synergy that exists between this condition. All right, so they are stand alone. All right, they are stand alone and they also complement each other. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So what are the conditions? These conditions, we say, firstly, you must have a mindset of intentional growth. For you to live purposefully, for you to grow intentionally, what should precede intentional living, all right, or what should precede intentional growth is your mindset. I might not have a lot of time to talk about the mindset or the concept of mindset, but I think it suffices to know that the mindset or your mindset is who you are. All right. I don't need to ask you what your name is, where you're from, where you're born, what family you're born into. I just need to listen to you, and listening to you over time, all right, tells me or will give me an idea on what mindset you have. So your mindset is who you are. It's the summation of your experience, all right, the summation of your decision, the summation of your thinking process, your background, and whatever. So the first condition is, all right, you must have a mindset, all right, that would precede intentional living and intentional growth. Now, once that mindset is in place, you must look for an environment where intentional growth is taught, and in addition to being taught, it is practiced as a culture. My emphasis really is that that curriculum on growth, right? Translating into a culture. So it is not only taught, in other words, you don't only hear it, you see it. All right. And in addition to seeing, you feel it. All right. So I want to show you a table that best illustrates these two conditions that must be met if you must grow purposefully and intentionally. So what you have on the screen is a table, the condition for purposeful living and intentional growth. So I've broken this into five main areas, and I'm sure this is where those who are listening to the audio podcast, we wish they can look at the screen, but of course you can head on to YouTube and you can see the slides for yourself. And I think it's more interesting when you have something to see. All right. Now, these are the five areas. Let me start from the first, which we started to share on. We say it start with willingness, right? That the mindset of intentional growth starts with willingness. That is a checklist of five, all right, within the conditions for purposeful living and intentional growth. So both the mindset, that an individual needs and the environment where intentional growth is stored and practiced, there's a checklist of 5. All right. So the first is willingness. All right. The individual must have a willingness to grow. All right. There must be a clear desire. All right. There must be a sincere desire. All right, for growth to happen. So that willingness must be there. Now, when you look at the other side, all right, the environment where growth is not only taught but practiced as a culture, we say that willingness to grow is strengthened. All right, it's not just about the willingness that happens because you have the mindset of intentional growth. Really, it's the environment that strengthens that willingness, that desire to grow. All right, and secondly, we looked at awareness. We said willingness will naturally translate to awareness. All right, when you're willing to grow, you're also, all right, it becomes easy for you to know where you are. All right, growing is easy when we know who we are. And I gave you a quote from John C. Maxwell that to grow yourself, you must know yourself. So awareness on the path of the individual, all right, becomes easy. Now, when you're within an environment, all right, where this intentional growth is taught and practiced, the awareness of where you are becomes very clear. You know where you are because you are within an environment where growth is taught, all right, and it is practiced as a culture, all right. Then the third checklist you're looking at, the third box you're looking at is change, right? Now, when you begin to grow, the willingness is there, all right, and there's an awareness of where you are. Now, change becomes easy to make. Why? You know where you are. You have a desire to grow. There's an awareness to grow. So you begin to make the little effort. You're now so sure or so clear that this is what I need to do. These are areas where I need to change. All right. I give you an example of a student who desires a first class honor, and I say if you must graduate with first class honor, right, you must have that willingness to grow. Let me try to paint this in another light. If you want to, let's say you want to triple your earnings, right? You want to become financially free or independent. This same process or these same conditions must be met. You must have a willingness to leave whatever, all right, might be holding you back in terms of growing your finance. You must be willing enough to earn more. You must be willing enough to learn more. You must be willing enough to invest in yourself. Now, out of that willingness brings an awareness. You now know, oh, this is what I earn monthly. All right, this is what I can earn monthly. It's an awareness. Now, that leads to change. Now, you begin to find out that if I must earn more, all right, and if I must spend less, there are habits within me I must change. For example, I can't afford to spend recklessly. I can't afford to spend by impulse. I can't afford to spend without a budget or without a clear plan on what I'm spending on. That you have there are changes that you need to make. Now, when you're within an environment where this growth is taught and practiced, changes becomes easy. It becomes so easy. Then the next thing you find after change is action. And if you recall, I will tell you, I've always said this for those of us who are within me. I said growth can only occur where changes, all right, growth can only happens where changes has occurred. If using the financial example I just give you, all right, you want to be financially free and you don't make the changes you need to make, all right, earn as much as you want to or you desire to, all right, if those changes doesn't happen, all right, you can't grow more. So you find people making a whole lot of action, you find people exerting a lot of effort, right, you find people exhausting themselves, right, you're trying to grow, but growth is not happening. You know why? Until changes happens internally, right, growth cannot really happen. So action you must take for growth to happen, that comes from the mindset of intentional growth. Then on the path of the environment, all right, that action you need to take becomes accountable. This is why if you're within an environment where these two things happen, where it's taught and practiced as a culture, I'm sure every well-meaning organization or environment who wants her member to grow will come up with structures to ensure that this growth journey you are currently in or you've embarked on, is measurable. It can be accounted for. All right, you can say, okay, I've been here for the last 3 months, and in the last 3 months, this is what I have been able to achieve. This was how I came in. It's more like a first year student taking a picture, right? Taking a selfie. Within the week, I've been meeting beautiful minds, 100 level students, right here in the university. And whenever I do, I just look at them, then my mind goes to work immediately. I look at them and I already can see what they'll be looking at, how they'll be looking, right, in the next 4 or 5 years of their program. Now that is possible if they grow, right? But already in my mind, I can see how they will look like. Now, in that same light, you should be able to measure your growth level. You should be able to measure your awareness, all right? You should be able to measure your willingness. You should be able to measure the changes that have occurred, all right, within a short period of time. And that is possible when you're within this environment where growth is taught, all right, and it's practiced as a culture. At that moment, actions becomes measurable and accountable. Then lastly, we have results. All right. Now, when you have the willingness to grow, you have an awareness to grow, all right, you begin to make changes to move from where you are, all right, and you begin to take action. All of this put together will lead to purpose discovery. That's the result of the mindset. That's the importance of having the mindset of intentional growth. All of that put together will accumulate into you having an idea of your purpose, and you will get to appreciate this more when we look at why people don't grow. Now, at the individual level, it leads to purpose discovery. Then when you're within an environment where you've discovered your purpose, you know what to do, what happens is the second phase of purpose discovery. And I say that is purpose development. If you listen carefully to the first section last week, I did mention that this thing we talk about purpose is divided into 3 phases or 3 stages, if you like. All right, it happens by awareness. All right, so purpose discovery, then having discovered what you're made to do, all right, and I'm going to break this clearly down. I understand the subject of purpose discovery has been taught by well-meaning people, but somehow we still have there are still some gray areas we need to touch. I try to do that in this very section. So it begins by an awareness, discovery of your skill, your ability, your gift, your uniqueness, all right. Then now those uniqueness, those ability, right, those skill has to be refined. Now that leads to the second stage of purpose, which is purpose development. Then the third stage is purpose deployment. I'm sure I'm going to create another time to look at these 3 levels, stages, or phases of purpose. So that table you have gives you an insight on those 2 conditions for purposeful living and for intentional growth. Cannot be compromised, right? Cannot be compromised. And I also give you from last week's section, I looking at the greatest story ever told. We looked at the shortest story ever told, which is that of Solomon Grundy. And I said from the life of Solomon Grundy, there are 4 lessons. All right, life is measured by time. All right, but your impact is not measured by time, it is measured by your contribution. Then I did say time is short, all right, and time is short there really means you don't have all the time to do what you need to do, all right. For Solomon Grundy, it was 7 days at best, right? For you, it could be longer, all right, or shorter. It's our prayers that, of course, we live longer. But then again, my question is, what's the point of living longer if you won't grow purposefully? What's the point of living longer if you won't live, intentionally? All right. These are some of my contemplation when I think about growing old. You can grow old without growing gold. I needed to take a cheap pill there. You can grow old. It's possible. Growing old is natural, right? But growing gold is not natural. A whole lot of intentionality has to be involved if you must grow gold, All right, then I concluded by saying life continues. All right, that's the fourth lesson. Life continues. Whether you grow gold or you grow old, life continues. If you grow gold, you reap the reward of growing gold. If you grow old, you reap the reward. If you grow old without growing gold, you reap the reward of growing old. All right, and no benefits. All right, for growing gold. All right, then I did tell you that life is a story. And if life is a story, we are looking at three characters in that very story. All right, we are looking at the first character, all right, the few who has a story to write. All right, the many who is reading the story of others. All right, the many who are reading the story of others. Then we have the vast majority that neither has a story to tell, to share, to write, or a story to read. And I tell you, it's my desire, my hope that you don't find yourself amidst these people. The world is filled up with the vast majority who has no idea of what is happening or what is to happen. In the same light, the world is filled up with a vast majority of people that has no idea, all right, of writing their story. When I mean writing your story, of course, I taught you this last week section. It's beyond you having a pen writing your stories in the book. No, I'm talking about writing your stories by the choices you make daily, by the actions you make, all right, daily, by the decisions you take, by your association. This is how we write our story. So it's really my prayer that you don't find yourself among the vast majority that neither has a story to tell, all right, or has a story to write. Now, that was a recap I needed to do there. Now, let's look at why people don't grow. Why people don't grow. And in looking or discussing on this subject on why people don't grow, I can tell you it's a big question. If I ask you now, Leslie, why are people not growing? I'm sure you have your answers. Now, your answers might not be completely wrong, but I want to introduce a perspective to the subject of why people don't grow. And I think you will find this very interesting. Now, in doing so, I want to introduce you to a concept. This concept comes from a personal observation, and I like to share this concept and this observation with you. It is the divide of responsibility. This will usher us into, all right, answering the question why people don't grow. Now, let's look at the divide of responsibility. And the divide of responsibility simply says success and failures are all matters of responsibility. Our success and our failures in life are all matters of responsibility. Now, let me teach on this divide of responsibility. You see, within the divide of responsibility, we are looking at two groups of people, really. All right. We are looking at two groups of people. We are looking at a group, the first group, which is an outward focus group. Then we are looking at the other group, which is an inward focus group. So let's start with the outward focus group. Now, this group of people, all right, they seem to neglect their responsibility to grow, all right. They make excuses for why they are not growing. They can tell you the reason why we're not growing is because of the government, the weather, our family background, our tribe, religion, and others. Their outward or their look or their outlook for not growing is largely external. So you ask them, why are you not growing? And you hear something like, it is the government. Oh, of course, now with all biases, I'm a Nigerian. So if you're listening to this podcast from the rest of the world, if you're in Nigeria, you understand the momentum is currently building up for the general elections in 2027. Now you ask an individual, why are you not growing? And you get excuses like, it's the government, all right? I think Peter Obi should have been the president. Or maybe it's because I'm from the north. In the north, you don't have so much opportunities. There are few opportunities compared to places like, the west, compared to Lagos or Abuja. Now, that might be true, all right? But it is not the reason why you're not growing, all right? It is not the reason why you're not growing, all right? The environment can play a role in not growing. All right, I can assure you the environment is not the only reason why you're not growing, because within that same environment you have people who are thriving. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have people who are doing well, right? So blaming the environment alone for not growing is a cheap one. All right. So you ask them, why are you not growing? Say, it's because I come from a family of 12, all right, and I'm the first boy or the first girl, all right, or the firstborn. There's so much expectation from me. This is why I'm not growing. That might look true, all right, but it cannot be the reason why you're not growing, all right. Or maybe someone want to make blame his or her religion and say, oh, it's because I'm a Christian or I'm Muslim, all right. This is why things are difficult for me. Again, that might look true, all right, from the surface. It might look true, but it's definitely not the reason why you're not growing. So the first group of people we have whose focus are outward, all right, like to blame external factors for why they are not growing. Then we have the other group of people, all right, the people who has their focus inwards, all right. Now, this second group of people hold themselves accountable for their level of growth in life. They do not look to an external factor for why they don't grow. They don't also blame an external factor for why they don't grow. They basically point at themselves for whether they are growing or not growing. So their focus is inward, while the focus of the other group, right, is outward. Now let me show you a table, and this year expect to see tables like this. Tables help us to break down this information so you clearly understand. Now, what you can see on the screen is a table. All right. Now, I've divided this table into the internal and the external. In other words, people with the inward, all right, the people with the inward focus and those with the external focus. All right. Now, within this divide of responsibility, I like you to see this clearly. Now, those with inward focus or those with internal focus, they take responsibility. All right. Those with external focus, they give out responsibility. Oh my. I think I should say that again. Now, when you are an individual who is focused on yourself, you want to grow, all right? You're looking on the inside of yourself for why you're growing or why you're not growing. Your eyes are fixed in yourself. It is fixed inward. You would naturally take responsibility. So if we ask you, why don't you speak English fluently? What you will say is, you won't tell us, oh, it's my English teacher. That looks like an excuse, but it is too cheap for an excuse. And come on now, your teacher was there just to provide guidance. All right, you have the responsibility to grow, to speak English fluently. You have the responsibility to learn how to speak English fluently. All right, now, when you have the external, all right, when you are external in your growth, or you like to tag or blame external factors, you give out responsibility. So it's easy to make excuses. Oh, he's my teacher. He doesn't know how to teach English. But then he was employed by your school. Do you understand what I'm saying? So inward, you take responsibility. Outward focus, they give out responsibility. Secondly, inward take control of their life. All right. They are primarily in control of their life. They know what is happening in their life. They are not guessing their way through life. They know exactly what they want. Why? When you take enough responsibility, you know where you are. All right. When you take enough responsibility, you have a level of control. That control is what I like to call predictability. It becomes predictable where you are headed to. And I'm going to share more about this as we look into this. I can't just have enough of this. It's just so interesting. It is so enlightening. All right. Now, why you take control of your life, if you are inward focused, those with the outward focus, you know what they do? They are not in control of their life. Life is in control over them. So they are not in a place where they can tell you, this is what will happen in my life. No, they don't have that clue. All right. Rather, they live life to themselves. Reminds me of a statement made by Jerry Horner. All right. I shared with you the quote from Jerry Horner. Now, Jerry Horner said something that most people are, creation of fact, and other persons are creature of circumstance. All right. In other words, you can create your possibility, or you let the environment decide what your possibilities are. That is what it is. That is what it is. All right. So, thirdly, your focus, if you are an inward person, all right, it is internal. And if you're an outward person, your focus is external. This is why people who are not prosperous in that sense, all right, people who are, and I say this with a whole lot of respect for whatever you're doing, right, but people who are not prosperous, who don't have something going on for themselves, whose life can be said to be meaningful, right, their eyes are most times on other persons. They are looking for what they can get, not what they can do. Their focus is outward. All right, this is why I don't know, but for someone like myself, and I can extend this mindset to whoever cares to adopt it, I don't look at the riches of a man. When I meet with a great man, I'm not looking at what your assets are really. I'm looking at what can I learn that will give me your assets. All right. What can I get from you? What are the principles you're currently applying that I can learn and also apply so I can reflect, so my life can also reflect that possibility I've seen in you? All right. Rather than stretching my hands and saying, give me money, I would rather stretch out my hands and say, give me access to your knowledge, give me access to your principles. Are you understand what I'm saying here? All right. So if you're an inward focused person, your focus is internal. If you're an outward focused person, your focus is external. All right. Let me try to hurry now. All right. Now, inward, those with the inward focus, they hold themselves accountable. All right. Why those with the external factor or looking at external factor, all right, they hold others accountable. And I think it's a silly thing to do. I was reading a book on some people fail. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we learn, by John C. Maxwell. And he made a statement. He said, a certain man went to visit a therapist. All right. And while he was with his therapy, the therapy asked him a question. He said, so, why are you like this? And he said, there are three reasons there are three reasons for why I am like this. He said, firstly, my wife. Secondly, my son. Thirdly, my job. I couldn't help but laugh. In fact, on the book that I wrote out, I had to write, wow, you don't mean it. You mean there are three reasons for why you are where you currently are, and it's your wife, it's your son or your daughter, and your job. All right. They hold other persons accountable. Those with the inward focus hold themselves accountable. All right. The next point is change for those with inward focus happens in the inside. All right. And it is seen on the outside. The process for change, remember we talked about change as part of the mindset, part of the checklist for an individual to have a mindset, all right, for growth. All right. So now that change, there's a process for change. That change happens first from the inside, then it is seen on the outside. But I kid you not, if you're a person who has an outward focus, all right, or an outward, or perhaps you have an external, you look at external factors for why you're not growing. Change for you will not happen from the inside. Change will happen on the outside, then it will be felt in the inside. I wish I have an example to tell you. So when you've hurt enough from not growing financially, all right, you try to make changes from the outside. So just to make us look like, or make convince people that you're financially there or you're financially free. Whenever you have a little change that comes into your account, you try to prove a point. That is exactly what happens. You try to prove a point, right? You try to tell us, look at my gadget. You've just changed your gadget, all right? So it's an outward outlook. So you show us, this is my gadget. Oh, this is my new shoe, and this is my new this, and this is my new that. Change for them happens on the outside, then it is felt on the inside. So while you were showing us your phone, while you're showing us the things you bought on the outside that has seemed to change you from the outside, you are hurting from the inside. Listen, if you have it, you don't need to prove to anybody that you have it. It is there. Listen, success in itself is so loud. Success in itself is already very loud. You don't need to rub it. If I am pretty successful, I am pretty successful. I don't need to come down to the stage and tell you how much of a successful person I am. From my life alone, you would know why it is possible. The change that needed to occur happened from the inside. But if changes start from the outside, I'm going to be hot from the inside. And from there, I try to prove you point. Say, hey, I used to have 1 million naira. It's because this and that. I do you understand what I'm saying here? All right. I'm having the best of my time. I just trust you. Also, you're having the best of your time. All right. So, what's the next point? The sixth point is that those with an inward level of focus point fingers to themselves. If they ever need to point the finger, they are pointing the finger to themselves. Those with the outward focus, they are pointing the fingers to other persons. So it is you. It is you. All right. And corporately, you find this a lot happen in an organization. So something happens and people are quick to point hands. So it is because you are here, it's because you did this, because you did that. And if you are a leader who would also possess an outward focus, you will be looking for somebody to blame. All right. So you're looking for somebody to point your finger at. But you're a leader with an inward focus. You don't look at who is to be blamed. All right. You look at what can we do to make it better. So you are not focused on an individual. You're focused on the circumstances. And your focus really is to how can we improve this. All right. Not how can we cast the blame. And that brings me to the next point. For an individual with an inward focus, their question is why and how. Why am I stagnated? Why does it look like I'm not growing? Why does it look like my academic performance is not growing? All right. And how can I make this better? How can I grow as an individual? All right. But at the other side of the divide, the question is who and who. So who is to be blamed? Who is to be blamed? What is to be blamed? Do you understand the picture I'm creating? Then lastly, those with the inward level of focus practice what I just learned from John C. Maxwell. He said they practice brainstorming. This is the process where your brain goes to work creatively looking for ideas, trying to figure out what is the best fit for this situation or what is the best fit for me. Why brainstorming happens on the part of the individual who has an inward focus, all right? The person who has an external focus or an outward focus practice blame storming. Listen to the word blame storming. So you have brainstorming, then you have brainstorming. Now, both brainstorming and brainstorming is a creative process. I'm going to teach you on, the 10 excuses. Now I'm going to teach you on how did I tie to that message now. Oh my, I just hope I haven't forgotten. All right, excuses. There's a little teaching section I'm going to be doing within the year. All right, in 2026 about excuses, and then you will understand that to make an excuse, you need to be very creative. When you make an excuse, you're really engaging the creative part of your brain. It's more like when you're thinking for a solution. So when you think for an idea, you are engaging the creative part of your brain. When you also think for an excuse to make, you are also engaging a creative part of your brain. Now, the end product justifies whatever is done. All right. So when I think creatively, all right, when I brainstorm, you can see an idea as an evidence of my brainstorming. When I brainstorm, which is also a creative process, all right, I am looking for an individual to call on. I'm looking for an individual to point my fingers on or to point my fingers at. So these are both processes you have to look out for. I tell you, I will expand this teaching. It's something you want to look out for. The same process it takes an artist to draw is the same process it takes somebody who is going to make a blame, because you need to engage that part of your brain to look for. It's a very creative process. So when you ask, okay, why are you not growing? You have to think creatively to say, in 1996 when I was born, or in 1999 when I was born, there was this commotion and that commotion. Inside of the commotion that happened, then my parents relocated. Then why they relocated, then they changed my education, they changed my school, and why they changed my school, then I had a teacher who wasn't so. I don't understand what I'm saying. It's a creative process, really. It's a creative process. So you begin to think. You begin to think. That same level of thinking you are engaging is the same level of thinking an artisan, a musician, a skilled person is engaging. But this time, the skilled person is bringing an idea, which is a representation of his thinking process. While you, who is practice brainstorming, you're bringing up a person, a situation, a circumstance that should be blamed for why you're not growing. Oh my, what a section we are having here. What a section we are having here. So, if you really understand this, I tell you, it is really, really amazing. Now, let's now look at the subject for the day, why people don't grow. I think by now you now understand, um, the set of people that don't grow. And by the way, when we look at the divide of responsibility, is the same thing, psychologists will call the locus of control. And they say in the locus of control, we have both people, just like we have in the divide of control. We have people with internal locus of control, and then again we have people with external locus of control. All right, the same principle applies, the same concept really. You say those with the internal level of control take for their gains and losses of life, they hold themselves accountable. Those with external locus of control, all right, for their gains and their losses in life, they hold somebody accountable or hold a situation accountable. Right. Now, with this understanding of the divide of responsibility, I think you already know the set of people who don't grow. That was a way of introducing you to know the set of people that don't grow. Now, without understanding, you can tell clearly, without any doubt, there's no gainsaying here, that the people who don't grow are those with the outward focus, are those who are focused on external factors, are those with the external locus of control, those who neglect responsibility, those who do those who point fingers to other persons, those who question is who and what, those who practice brainstorming, those who give out responsibility, those who are not in control of their life. Do you understand? Those are the kind of people that don't grow. Now that we have the answer, why do you think they are not growing? It's easy to say why they are not growing is procrastination, it's laziness, it's a lack of priority, and many more. Now, you're not completely wrong, but you need to understand that within the scope of what I'm teaching you now, you now see that it's beyond procrastination in that sense. It is beyond laziness in that sense. It is beyond the issue of priority. All right, all of these are subsets from a greater issue for why people are not growing. All of these are a fragment from the main reason why people are not growing. And I'd like to share with you very quickly as I try to wrap up 4 reasons why people are not growing. 4 reasons. All right, the first reason why people are not growing is a lack, or I would say no sense of purpose. A lack of a sense of purpose. Then a lack or a sense or no sense of direction, or no sense of timing. All right, then no plan for growth. So let me take that again. We have 4 reasons why people are not growing: no sense of purpose, no sense of direction, no sense of timing, and no plan for growth, for growing. Now let me give you the first one: no sense of purpose. You see, people don't grow or live purposefully because they don't know who they are. Now, let me talk about that issue of purpose discovery. When I look at purpose discovery, the first point of looking at purpose discovery, really, for me as an individual and, as a life coach who have, I've gone through some certain things, I've observed, I've done studies, I can tell you, if we need to talk about purpose discovery, the first thing we need to look at is identity. We need to first understand who you are if purpose must be born. So purpose discovery starts with an identity. It starts with you understanding your identity. Because if you understand your identity, you would know your destiny. All right? It's more like saying, okay, what have I been made to do? What have I been made? The question is not what have you been made to do? The question is, do you know who you are? One time, Michael Jackson was asked, who are you? And he said, no, he wasn't asked, who are you? He was asked, Michael, do you like music? You know what he said? He said, I am music. That's an identity. Did you get it? That's an identity. You see, I am music. So purpose discovery start with an identity. You need to know who you are. When you know who you are, all right, you know your destiny. You have an insight into your destiny. All right, you have an insight into the knowledge of your destiny. Now, that knowledge gives you a direction. It gives your life a direction. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you need to know who you are. So people don't grow because they don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. They don't have an identity. They don't have a clear picture for who they are. Now, if you're looking at my slide, you would see two pictures of mine. Now, this was, I think I was in year 2. Yes. I think I was in year 2, 200 level, first semester or second semester or thereabout. Now, from age 13, 14, and 15, I had an interest in music. I enjoyed seeing, music videos and songs from, say, Wizkid, Olamide, Davido, and the rest of those guys. I thought I was a singer. I thought I could sing like Wizkid. But then again, I struggled musically. Even when I started to sing, there was a part of my life that I started to take on music as a career. I struggled to sing. Though I would try, right? I didn't try to sing Afro, I tried to sing gospel, right? But regardless of how much I tried, I struggled. Now, I wasn't struggling because I wasn't any good. You know why I was struggling? That was not my identity. It wasn't my identity. It wasn't an area of my gifting. So it became very, very difficult to grow. So I would do the song scoring, I would do the song outline and the rest of the things. But when it was time to deploy this gifting, I struggled. It was capped. Why was it capped? This was a young man trying to do what he has not been called to do. So you begin to struggle. So in other words, it was almost impossible to grow in an area where I wasn't called in. It was impossible to grow in an area that doesn't define who I am. And this is why many people are struggling. So people don't grow because they lack a sense of purpose. Then after I left music, I started to, I dove into modeling. I started to fall in love with modeling, as a profession and as a career. I loved and I craved the idea of becoming a model. It was all for the fun, all for the camera. And as you can guess, I struggled. I struggled to keep fit. I struggled to maintain the modeling diet and their lifestyle. I struggled. Why was I struggling? I was struggling because this is not who I am. This is what I was called to be. All right. So it was difficult to grow as a model. If you had seen me, you'd say, this guy is fit. He looks like a model. But no, I'm not a model. Maybe I might be a model in knowledge, model in my lifestyle. But when I mean a model, I'm not a fashion model. All right. And it's beyond my sense of fashion. This is not my identity. So I think you might have similar experiences in areas of your life where you're not growing. And you need to ask the question, do I know who I am? When you know who you are, all right, it becomes very possible for growth to take place. Number 2, why people don't grow? No sense of direction. Listen, when you don't know who you are, you can't also tell where you're going. If I don't know who I am, I can't tell where I'm going. That identity gives me an idea of where I am headed. It gives me an idea of my direction in life. All right. So people don't grow because they lack a sense of direction. Your direction in life is connected to your purpose, which is your identity. So when you know who you are, by nature and by instincts, you begin to look out for the road that leads to where you're going. All right. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm traveling to Lagos. All right. I need to travel to Lagos and I go down to the airport and I buy a ticket. Now, before buying a ticket for traveling to Lagos, it is an awareness of my destination, which is my purpose now. It's an awareness of my destination that gives me a clear understanding of where I'm going. So I will proceed to the counter, all right, and I will buy a ticket from an airline traveling to my destination, which is now my direction. Do you understand that picture? All right. So I know my destination and I already know what road would lead to my destination. All right. So what informs my decision is my destination. What informs my direction for life is my destination. And that destination, there's my purpose. Let's say I want to go by road. All right. If I buy a bus ticket or a train ticket going by road, all right, I'm so sure I'll be buying a ticket going to Lagos. All right. I'll be booking a vehicle going to Lagos. And if for any reason while on the journey of Lagos, because I know my direction, all right, I'm saying this literally, all right, or I'm just trying to paint a picture. Sometimes you might know the direction, you won't know the exact direction, at least to Lagos, if you are not a commuter or a constant traveler. But now, in that sense, because I know where I'm headed to, if I see the driver going to another direction that doesn't look like my destination, I can ask him a question. Hey, driver, is this my direction? Is this where I'm heading to? What I'm saying to you in that light is the driver might be the other people around you. When you begin to connect yourself with other persons that doesn't look like they're going to the direction you're going to, you can call yourself and ask yourself the question, hey, listen, do you think you're going to where I'm going to? If we aren't going the same direction, if we don't have the same destination, then we shouldn't be going towards the same direction. That's simple. All right. The third reason why people are not growing, it's a sense of timing. It's a sense of timing. So people don't grow because they don't know who they are, all right, and so they can't grow, all right. But in addition, they don't have a sense of timing. So in other words, they can't tell how long it will take to get to their destination. Let me paint you a picture very clearly. You know, we talked about Lagos being your destination, then the road that leads to Lagos being your direction. If I go by air, 55 minutes, an hour, I should be in my destination. There's a sense of timing. Why do I need that sense of time? Because within that period of 55 minutes, all I should be doing should be connected to my destination. In other words, if you know who you are, all right, and you know the direction that leads you to where you've been called to, all right, or the direction that leads to your purpose or your destination, if you have a sense of timing to say, in the next 10 years, this is where I should be, that estimate or that estimate of when you should be, where you will be, right, gives you an idea of what you should be doing. This is why no part of my life and no part of our member in Life University and extensively those who we mentor, all right, or those who are connected to us, you should know where you are going, all right, an identity. You should know the road that leads you to where you're going. But in addition, you should be able to tell how long it will take for you to get to where you're going. Now, why this is not totally in your control, it gives you an insight on what you should be doing every day. So if I wake up and tell you I want to be a professor, I know that might be an identity, all right? I know the direction that leads me to my professorship, all right? And within that very idea or within that very direction or traveling that very direction, I know how long it will take me. And the reason I know how long it will take me, not because I want to start, doing a countdown, okay, for example, exactly from today, it will take me exactly 14, 15 years to become a professor. All right. Now, I don't have that. That knowledge is not because I want to do a countdown and to do a social media post to say, 13 years countdown to go, 13 years more to go, I'm going to be a professor. No, that timing gives me an idea of what I must be doing to arrive at my destination. So I want to be a professor. Okay, I now have my first degree. Okay, I want to be a professor. I've utilized 4 years or 5 years actively chasing a first degree. Now, if you want to be a professor, you need to have a master's degree. So I go for my master's. All right, 2 years, I'm done with my master's. Oh, you want to be a professor, you must have a PhD. All right, so I go down, I get my PhD in 3 years. What am I doing? I am actively doing something that relates to my purpose, that relates to my destination. And check out that word destination. It is from the word destiny, because that destination gives you an idea of your destiny, where you're headed to, and it gives you a direction. So, my question is, for whatever you think you are as an identity, do you know how long it should take you to get there? Now, don't be so focused on calculating how long. If you can do that, amazing. But don't be so focused, don't be trapped in calculating how long. If you ever arrive at, the duration it will take you to be where you want to be, now turn that duration to an assignment. What should I be doing? Do you understand that? And now, lastly, why people don't grow? People don't grow because they lack a plan for growth. Listen, when you know who you are, then you know your direction, then you have a sense of timing and a sense of awareness for what you should be doing within that timing or within the duration of your destination. You must have a plan. Do you get it now? You must have a plan. All right? You must have a plan, because the question is, what should I be doing while I am on my destination? Which is my purpose? What should I be doing? All right? What you should be doing, you should be learning. You should be improving your skills, honing your skills. You should be investing in yourself. All right? You should be connecting with people going to the same destination. You should be connected with people who are boarding the same flight, heading to the same destination. Do you understand what I'm saying? So those are the 4 things you must do, because this can engage you for a lifetime. Do you know the reason people have enough time to backbite, all right, to talk down on people, is because they are not busy enough. They are not busy with their assignment. They are not busy with their purpose. If they have a clear-cut understanding of who they are, what direction should take them to their destination, the amount of time that would lead them there, and what they should be doing, listen, they will be so engrossed in whatever they are called to do that they won't have any moment left to talk about people. Do you understand that? I've just given you a secret for free. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right. So when you're learning, when you're improving your skills, because it is important you improve your skills. Your skills are pathways. All right. It is connected to your purpose. So arriving at your destination, you need to hone your skills. So if you're a communicator, you need to hone your communication skills. If you are a writer, you need to hone your writing skills. Please make reference to my section right on people, possibilities, and platform. This will give you an insight on honing your skills, because listen, you have a possibility, all right, you have a possibility. That possibility represents your skills and your gifting. Then you need a platform to showcase your gifting and your skills. But overall, you need people to give you platforms to showcase your possibilities. So if you can, make reference. I'll try to see how we can upload that if it's not already uploaded, so you can have the time to go through that very section and enjoy it. Now, let me conclude by saying this. When you have a plan to grow, achieving your purpose becomes easy. When you have a plan to grow, reaching your destination becomes easy. When you have a plan to grow, the direction becomes clearer. The distance from where you are and where you would be is growth based. And that can only happen when you find your identity, when you know who you are and where you're going and how long it will take you to arrive there. And finally, when you follow your plan to grow. Guys, I think you might not get this teaching in one sitting. Come back to this teaching, listen again, play it over time. Let it be part of your playlist for the new week. All right. And as you do that, I can assure you, you will grow. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I remain your very good friend, Arise Michael Godfrey. It's our year of purposeful living, and our best life is definitely now. If this was a blessing to you, if you enjoyed this very audio podcast, I like you share the link to your friends, share the link to a family member, and everybody you can connect with so they can be on the right side of the divide of responsibility. Thank you so much, and I love you, and see you when I see you.